Hey guys, so with the recent release of Moon Knight on Disney Plus, I decided it would be appropriate for this episode for me to film this one late at night with it being dark and with severe sleep deprivation, which is totally an homage to Moon Knight and not at all a reference to the fact that I've been away on a work trip for the last week and I'm severely sleep deprived. But you know who else is severely sleep deprived? MCU's Moon Knight, a character that a lot of us probably have never heard about before, and one of the few characters that has been recently introduced to us in the MCU with practically no information about who he is going into it. And so who is Moon Knight? Who is Stephen Grant? And most importantly, what is actually real? Because Moon Knight is a show that's trying to trip us up from the very beginning, but I've already figured it all out. Here we go. So, who is Moon Knight? So in the comics, Moon Knight's real identity is Marc Spector. Or Sir Marc Spector? I mean, he's a knight, right? Marc Spector, a former CIA agent with special training from the Marines, who is overall a special forces dude with a lot of experience at beating people up. The story goes that at a very young age, Marc Spector had some sort of traumatic event happen to him. This traumatic event, of course, led to him developing multiple personalities, the most apparent one that we know of being Stephen Grant. After doing many things as a CIA/ex-Marine would do, Marc finds himself at death's door. And while nearly dying, he arrives at a statue of Khonshu, at which point he makes a deal with this ancient Egyptian god, vowing to serve him and help him in exchange for Khonshu saving his life. So, what does this have to do with MCU's Moon Knight? And how does this let us know what they're going to do with this character? See, the important thing that we know about Moon Knight already is that he already has his powers. Stephen Grant doesn't need to meet Khonshu, he doesn't need to get possessed by the spirit, because he already has the powers from episode 1. And by the looks of it, he hasn't just gotten those powers recently. It looks like he's had these powers for several months. So just like Spider-Man in the movie Homecoming, Sir Stephen Grant is already a hero, or an anti-hero, or a villain. Honestly, to be determined. But irregardless of when he got his powers, Stephen Grant is undeniably already connected to Khonshu. And it's a psychic connection that Stephen has with Khonshu that actually is damaging his mind. Because it's very well believed that in the comics, while Marc had dissociative identities even as a child, it wasn't really till his possession by Khonshu that his identity and his mind really broke completely, fully separating all of these identities. But in the MCU, we get the character of Stephen Grant, who is being portrayed to us as Marc Spector's base identity. Stephen Grant is the version of Marc who's walking around and is awake during most of the day, and it's only when he appears to go to sleep that Marc gains control over his body, and Marc is able to run around doing Khonshu's bidding. And so it would seem in MCU's Moon Knight, Stephen Grant is actually the main identity. Except that he's clearly not. See, I told you I got this whole show already figured out. Like, doy. See, the trick of Moon Knight is that the trick in Moon Knight is that Stephen Grant isn't actually a real person. The story is being told to us through the perspective of Stephen Grant, but there are clear indications that Stephen Grant isn't even real. Take, for example, his best friend. This random homeless guy whose name is Crawley, or street performer. He might not be homeless. That was rude to me. His conversations with Crawley are entirely one-sided, and there's no indication that this guy even knows who he is. And the second most long-term commitment, Stephen's relationship to his mother, who he seems to call very often, almost every day, and yet never actually speaks to on the phone. Almost as if his mother doesn't exist, or died in a tragic accident when he was a kid that he never processed.
Anyway, Mum, all's well here, not too bad. I wake up every morning still feeling like I got hit by a bus.
And even his co-workers at work all seem to not remember his name, quite often referring to him as Stevie.
Stevie,
Right?
I better not be you again.
Sorry, Donna.
Don't know how many times I have to tell you this. You're not the bloody tour guide, Stevie.
Stephen, actually, I am.
Stevie, you absolute rascal. I didn't know you'd taken a crack.
Hey, JB, how you doing, mate?
How's it going, Scotty? All right, mate?
It's Stephen.
I do work here.
Oh, God.
I'd assumed Stephen Grant was an alias. Imagine my surprise to find you here.
Which, as we already know at this point, that Marc sometimes pretends to be Stephen at his job, do you think Marc is telling people that his name is Stevie? Because Marc thinks of Stephen as his younger brother and calls him Stevie. By the way, guys, if you like my videos but you don't like the camera quality or the sound quality, then subscribe, because I have no money, and that's your fault. Anyways, and it doesn't look like the job he has been at for a long time. It seems that he's a fairly recent employee at the museum gift shop, or museum snack shop. But meanwhile, he appears to have had an entire past life.
I've been texting and calling you for months. You couldn't give me any sign that you were okay?
Because Mark, on the other hand, has a relationship that goes months back. Mark apparently has not seen Layla in a long time. A person who really does seem like that is Marc Spector's wife. Instead, it looks like Mark has been basically disappeared for a very long time, no longer in contact with key members of his life. Almost as if Marc Spector died a few months ago.
And only the worthiest would be allowed to pass through the field of reeds.
And did it suck for you? Getting rejected from the field of reeds?
Well, that don't make sense, because I'm not dead, am I?
Stevie.
Am I?
And as we know from the origin story of Moon Knight in the comics, Marc Spector dying is a key point to which his story begins. And so if we assume that the series is using a similar origin story to the comics, it's quite likely that several months ago, Marc Spector died. And when he died, he made a deal with Khonshu. A deal that would allow him to keep on living, but in exchange for serving Khonshu for the rest of his life. With a slight caveat, that is, that Steven was always kept out of it. Because Mark actually thinks of Steven as a younger brother, someone who's more innocent than him, naive than him, less self-confident, and needs to be protected. And the more obvious reason why Stephen Grant is probably a fake character is his name is Stephen Grant, as in Stephen Grant Rogers. I mean, if you're going to come up with a fake identity for your morally unquestionable alter ego, that's a pretty good one to choose. Since we know that Marc Spector is actually American, it would fit that an American choosing a name, even subconsciously, for his alter ego pretty easily fall on Stephen Grant. And so while we follow Stephen's journey, trying to decipher what is and isn't real throughout the series of Moon Knight, don't be surprised if the truth that we find out in the end is that Stephen is the one who hasn't been real this whole time. Or at least he is not the original identity of his body. He's just a split of the identity of Marc Spector. But anyways, guys, that's just what I'm thinking. I hope you guys are excited for Moon Knight, because so far I'm loving it. But maybe I'm just identifying with the sleep deprivation aspect. I gotta go to bed. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.